It's time to restore this genre to its former glory.
Like a phoenix from the ashes!
Today we are ranking the biggest melodic death metal albums of 2023, and we're starting with Insomnium and Anno 1696. So Insomnium have an impeccable track record when it comes to their discography, if you ask me. Like, they are just incredible. They have no bad albums. I like some better than others, but I think this one's really fantastic too. Sakis Tolis of Rotting Christ makes an appearance on White Christ, and then the one that really stole the show for me, though, was Joanna Kirkella, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, on Godforsaken. That track is just breathtaking. You've got Lillian, the Witch Hunter, just really stepping up the band's already impressive ability to harness kind of both light and darkness when it comes to atmosphere. There's melancholy, there's anger, there's aggression, love Starless Paths too, just all around fantastic album. They did a great job, and I am putting it at perfection. Then we have Mercenary with Soundtrack to the End Times. So this is a Danish band that's been around since 1991, and this is actually their 8th album. So another one of these ones where I was not really familiar with them and had to kind of check them out. Unfortunately, unlike some underdogs in this genre that I think have only gotten better over the years, like Scar Symmetry, I think this represents some of my least favorite tropes in the genre. In a word, I just think it feels kind of cheesy in the same way I feel about In Flames' worst moments, and don't worry, we'll get to In Flames eventually. But yeah, I think it's listenable. There's definitely some solid riffs, but I think the vocals in particular just aren't really doing it for me, and so it landed at okay. But I want to point out again, just like all of these lists I've been doing by genre, like even the stuff in the bottom tiers is actually quite good. Next up we have Carnosus with Visions of Infinihility. This was a strong audience recommendation and one perfect for you fans of the Black Dahlia murder in particular, but also mixing in some revocation for some like technical and thrashy influences. It's dark and imposing with this dystopian concept, but also fun for headbanging. Lots of shredding on display, but also plenty of groove to keep you moving. So this one went to fantastic for me. Then we have Astralborne with Across the Aeons. Love the guitar work on here, another band in a similar territory as Insomnium, but I've also described some of their previous material as kind of In Flames meets Amon Amarth. Great hooks, shredding solos, and implementation of acoustic guitars. The main things that bring it down a bit for me is the need for a little bit more dynamic range regarding the volume and pacing, and more importantly again on the vocals. The growls here just feel super one note, in my opinion, and that takes away from the otherwise great and complex instrumentation, and even burying some of the melodies in just how overbearing the vocals can get at times. So that dragged it down to great for me, but still, not bad by any means. And once more, a reminder, this is obviously not an exhaustive list, so feel free to share additional albums and your own rankings in the comments, because this is all subjective, and hit the like button if you're enjoying the video so far. But next up is Foretoken with Triumphs. I previously compared these guys to Dissection, but they've really leaned more into the melodic death metal side of things on this one, going for a very grandiose sound with plenty of atmosphere, even some symphonic elements. One of those albums that's good song for song, but it's a little samey as a whole. The vocals in particular, again, I think could use more variety, so this one landed at good tier. Then we have Kalmah with Kalmah. Another fantastic album from these Finnish melodic death metal legends, now 25 years into their career and still supremely underrated. Like, come on. You gotta go listen to these guys if you're still somebody in the audience who has not taken the dive. The dual guitar work, absolutely stunning and triumphant as ever, especially going into the ripping neoclassical solos. Veli also getting in on the action with his keys as always, but they can also slow things down and break up the action with tracks like The Red and Black, No Words, Sad Enough, and especially the haunting string-infused closer Drifting in a Dream. this one is also going to perfection. Next up is Aeolian with Echoes of the Future. This band is from Mallorca, which I actually had to look up because I had no idea what that was. I appreciate their folky twist on the riffs, with some parts sounding almost like early In Flames and others bordering on Opeth's softer moments. But unfortunately, again, trend here, the vocals. That was like a deciding factor for a lot of these. I think overall, the songwriting too, unfortunately though, and the production also leaves something to be desired. But there's some really great stuff in here. There are definitely some gems. There's a lot of potential. I'm just not in love with this one. So I enjoy them. I want to continue checking out their albums, but just with the competition here, they ended up at okay. We have Omnium Gatherum with their Slasher EP. Another one of the most underrated bands from the Finnish scene, considering that they've been around since like 1996, and as usual, these tracks bring an excellent mix of heaviness and atmosphere with those deep, bellowing death growls, and offset by epic wailing guitars and melancholic riffs, very much on par, again, with Insomnium, I would say. Not to mention, a melodic death metal cover of the 80s classic Maniac was not something I expected or felt like I needed, but I apparently did. It's a good time. I'd honestly put this one higher than I did here, but again, steep competition, and it only has 4 songs, so I also put this one at good tier. Then there's Warmen with Here for None. This band was built by Jan Veerman of Children of Bodom fame. He is their keyboardist, and this album very much is in the same spirit of that band. If you are looking for more Children of Bodom, this is about as close as you can get, from the riffs to the triumphant synths, right down to the vocals too. Like, a lot of these songs feel like they could have come right off of Hate Crew Death Roll, and it doesn't hurt that vocalist Petri Lindroos of Encephirum fame also has a similar delivery. So these guys are very talented in their own right, though, and I can hear different ideas coming through too. So I don't want to like sell them as like a COB secondary or cover band or whatever. Like, they're doing some of their own stuff on Too Much Too Late, Night Terrors, and The End of the Line. Very excited to hear more from them. Fabulous album. It's going to great tier. Then we have Majesties, Vast Reaches Unclaimed. Now, I've frequently said that they don't make albums that truly sound like The Gallery or The Jester Race anymore, given how production in melodic death metal has evolved over the years. But these guys nailed it, and they have members of Obsequiae and Inexorum. This is just a singularity of 90s era nostalgia. It is soaked in reverb. The guitar harmonies never fail to put a smile on my face, and just in general, it transports me back to one of my favorite eras of listening to and discovering music. The only feedback I have is, say it with me, the vocals. But this time it's not that the vocals have an issue as of themselves. It's more the production. I think the vocals are a little too drowned out in comparison to the lush atmosphere in the guitars. So maybe a little tweaking with that would make it even better, but as it stands, it is going to fantastic. Then we have Exmortus with Necrophony. The darkness from the light, evil thoughts consume my life. Now, this album brings out all the best qualities of this band's sound, and with melodic death metal, thrash metal, neoclassical, all kind of mashed up together here and just captured with some of their best production to date. Another band I would call one of the most underrated. In fact, I just include them on like my 5th or 6th most underrated bands list. You can check that out for even more. The guitars here are what you really come for. Like, it's a whole package, but the guitar work is just so indulgent with just hook after hook and solo after solo, but always catchy, always engaging. It doesn't feel like just wankery. Like, it's so much fun. Just listen to Storm of Strings. That instrumental is just like, basically, if you took like old classical composers from back in the day and threw them an electric guitar, this is what they'd come up with. So yeah, this fantastic album. Should say fantastic because it's actually going to perfection. Then we have Sodomisery with Mazaroth. First off, I gotta say, I hate this band's name. Like, I just think it's so dumb and corny. It doesn't fit the music, because really, the music is like combining Opeth with Insomnium and Dark Tranquility, and that's the vibe it goes for. It's again that big atmospheric kind of melancholic vibe, and so for it to be called Sodomisery just feels weird to me. I don't know. On paper, though, this band seems like everything I should love, but listening to the album all the way through just wasn't really sustaining my attention. It just feels kind of like a downer, similar to Catatonia, which we're going to talk about in a little bit too. If you prefer that sort of thing, the kind of doomier, slower sound, the more mournful sound, then you'll probably enjoy this, but I tend to prefer this genre a bit more triumphant and hopeful. So I also don't think the clean vocals here are very strong. So yeah, ultimately this one landed at okay for me. Then there's Death Clock with Dethalbum IV. So right off the bat, Brendan/Nathan's vocals have changed a bit on this album, moving from that deep kind of Archspire-esque grunt to just a raspier snarl, and I'm not sure if that's age or a stylistic choice, but that even slight shift, like, really changes the vibe of this album. And I'd say along with some of the production choices and just the overall vibe, like there's less fun on this album, which is really what I'm looking for in addition to the great musicianship. Like, they have a great lineup. I've seen them live. I've loved really every album, and I think that they're genuinely, this is not a gimmick. Like, this is not just a cartoon band. Like, they make genuinely good songs, but there's usually a sense of humor involved, and that energy is just missing on a lot of this album. Especially slower tracks like Deadface and Poisoned by Food. It's not bad, it's just unexpected and not exactly what I was wanting. I mean, after being gone for 10 years, it's hard to live up to the hype, so there's that. But this was one of my bigger disappointments of the year. The real standout track on here is Mutilation on a Saturday Night, but honestly, outside of for reviewing purposes, like, I haven't really gone back to listen to this one for fun, which is really sad, because I did that with all the other albums, and they're all on the shelf behind me. But yeah, this one went to good tier. It's not quite at the bottom, but definitely on the lower side of things. Then there's Cataclysm with Goliath. Goliath is this Canadian melodic death metal band's 15th album, if you can believe it, since forming back in the 90s. Like, there's so many of these bands. Melodic death metal, I feel like almost per capita has the most underrated bands that don't get talked about. Like, there's the big ones that always get discussed, like In Flames, and then there's like all of these other ones that are just so good and in many ways better, in my opinion, in some cases. But yeah, this album, damn fine riffage, very much in line with the big Swedish bands, sometimes fast and ferocious, kind of like At the Gates, and others more lumbering and warlike, again, kind of like Amon Amarth, making for some very engaging pacing on this album, and it knows just when to switch things up. Not one of my favorites here, but it rose pretty high up. It's going to great tier. Then we have Hinayana with Shatter and Fall. This Texas band blew me away with Death of the Cosmic a few years back, and they only continue to cement themselves as an up-and-comer to watch with this new full length. Their sound is massive, combining the already moody and dramatic tones of Insomnium with the grandiosity of, like, Moon Sorrow. And while it's a bit on the slower side, I think it's a good example of how to do that in a consistently engaging way. Plus, there are still some headbanging moments here and there, as with Reverse the Code, which is just a total banger. This one's going to fantastic. Then we have Chronicle with Where Chaos Thrives. This is the third album from this Denmark-based melodic death metal crew, and one highly recommended for fans of Children of Bodom, again, the Black Dahlia Murder also, and then maybe also some of the more riff-focused metalcore bands of the early 2000s, and yeah, it's a really solid thing. I didn't love it, didn't think it was at the bottom either, so another one that I would put at good tier. Then there's Mors Subita with Origin of Fire. Another Finnish band. I'm telling you, the Finnish scene is great, y'all. Like, there's so many amazing bands to check out from there. But these guys in particular are what you get if Soilwork never left their early 2000s sound. Like, they're as fast and vicious as Chainheart Suicide, but also at times as melodic and catchy as Natural Born Chaos. Origin of Fire is their 5th album, and as a melodic death metal junkie, I could not be more at home here. Tracks like Blackout and Blood Ego really bring back the magic again I felt from this genre back in high school. This was a latecomer to the list, but it rose right to the top, pretty high up too, like maybe even somewhere in here on Perfection. Then there's Stort Rain with Finitude. This band's been around since 2006, with Finitude being their 6th full-length record, and expect a just truly raging fusion of melodic death metal with technical death metal and neoclassical, and also some black metal, especially in the vocals. Many of these tracks running to closer to 6 minutes, so there's more than a little progressive influence in the songwriting as well. I'll admit, this is another one that I also felt like the vocals could be a little bit stronger and more dynamic, but not as much as some of the others I complained about, and honestly, just listen to the track Xeno Chaos. That should be enough to prove that the guitar work is just beyond reproach on this thing. It is so good, and then they mix in some, like, Spanish guitar here and there. There's some cool little twists and turns. I'm going to put this one also at great tier. And then finally, we're at Catatonia with Sky Void of Stars. Now, I get a lot of grief for this, but despite being a huge lover of the genre, obviously, this is another band I've just never really been able to fully get into. I just find their sound to be pretty drab and boring, and I get how people, again, more into the doomy, melancholic side of things would enjoy it a lot more than me. I like the first few songs on this album, and was kind of getting into it when I first started it up. And they definitely know how to build atmospheres, so respect with that. But it's like the deeper I got into it, the more I just wanted to go to sleep. Like, it started losing my attention, and yeah, it's just not my thing, is kind of what it comes down to. Definitely not bad by any means, and from an objective standpoint, as objective as I can be, I think there's a lot of talented stuff going on here, but ultimately for me, it's just okay. Then there's Fires in the Distance with Air Not Meant For Us. Another melodic death metal band at times that doubles as kind of a full-on doom metal band, and I'd compare these guys also the most to Catatonia, but frankly, again, I think this is a good example of songwriting being more interesting. So it's not me explicitly like just disliking that style or a particular band. I think it's just how you harness it. It's what you do with it and how it connects with me. And so I think here they do a great job of infusing these great earworm hooks into the melancholic atmosphere, which helps really carry me through the experience, keep me interested. Not to mention some beautiful use of sparkling piano and stunning synth backdrops. Really captivating stuff that feels like it fits right side by side with Hinayana, I'd say. So, fantastic. All right, a big one here. In Flames with Foregone. Now, as I said in the discography tier list, this was the first time in over a decade I was actually excited for a new In Flames album, because the early singles coming out got me excited. It seemed like they were kind of calling back to days of at least Soundtrack to Your Escape and Come Clarity, which is an era of the band I do actually really enjoy. And there's a lot of fantastic guitar work across the board, with Chris Broderick of Jag Panzer and Megadeth fame stepping into the fold, and I think that was a great addition for them. So yeah, the instrumentation is great, but unfortunately, Anders, it's like he just can't help himself. He brings it down with some of those cheesier, clean singing moments. Now, mind you, I think he did a lot better job than on the last few albums, where it just gets painfully unlistenable to me. But here, like, the songs are still good. It's just every time, though, we hit those points, it's like I'm literally hitting a wall with the song. I'm like getting into it, and then we get to that part, I'm just like, ugh, why? To the point I usually like skip past it. But still, I enjoyed this album. I think it's a step in the right direction for them, for my taste anyway. I just think that they could have easily knocked this out of the park, and I do hope they do next time. But as it stands, I'm just going to say that this one was just good, and kind of on the upper side of good at that. Then there's In Vision with Manuscript. I came across this band on one of my Bandcamp exploration segments, and I love how they take that bass, folky Insomnium sound and then really ramp up the aggression at times. Like, they also throw in some great symphonic elements, again, kind of like Mors Principium Est, with a dash here and there of Dark Tranquility and Soilwork. Great dynamics, excellent production. I really dig it, so be sure to check them out. They're definitely one of the smallest bands probably on this list. I'm putting this at great tier. Then there's Grimheart with Hellish Hunt. So if you dig high-energy pillaging music in the vein of Ensiferum, this is 100% the album for you. From the scene-setting acoustic intro to the triumphant dueling guitars of Hellbent Horde, this album comes right out the gate with swords and axes swinging from those soaring hooks and infectious rhythms to the windswept backing atmosphere. This may not be the best album on the list, but it's definitely one of the most fun, very impressive, especially for a debut, and I cannot wait to hear more from them, because I absolutely love this style, and I feel like the world needs more of it. So it's going to Fantastic, probably right around here. Then we have Night in Gales with the Black Stream. Now, Chris, who does the written reviews on the channel, periodically turns me onto more obscure melodic death metal bands I was completely unaware of, and this German band, despite being around since 1995, is one of those bands. Unfortunately, this album did not have a great first impression on me. I found both the songwriting and production to be kind of lackluster, kind of unengaging. I think it's growing on me a little bit, because I went back and listened to a song the other day, and I was like, oh, kind of like this one a little bit more. So, you know, it could rise up, but I may need to explore some of the earlier material too and see if that fares better for me, but ultimately this was another one that just sort of landed at okay for me. And that brings us to Scar Symmetry with the Singularity Phase 2 Xenotaph. Another incredibly underrated melodic death metal band that I mentioned earlier, and I love their more progressive take on the genre that sort of Soilwork meets Devin Townsend. Chrononautilus and Scorched Quadrant lead the way, equal parts crushingly heavy and incredibly catchy. Altergeist also has some Isan vibes, and I love the Meshuggah-y breakdowns on A Voyage with the Tailed Meteors. Honestly, this is what I was looking for from that last year's Soilwork album that I was kind of stoked about, and then I liked it, but I didn't love it. I think this does a better job of that, and carrying a similar energy with that opening track, but all the way through the album. And between the powerful cleans and wicked soloing, this thing just gets truly epic in every sense of the word. Definitely my favorite melodic death metal album of the year, one of my favorite albums of the year. It is going to perfection. Y'all check out this playlist for plenty more melodic death metal. And again, let me know down in the comments, where would you rank these albums? How might you rank them differently than me? Let's get a conversation going. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.